Hey guys, give me 1 second. Let me close this door. Ouch. Okay. How are you guys doing? Happy Saturday. Sorry, I'm trying to get myself all settled here today. Hey, how are you? It's been a long morning. I got my COVID vaccine, the second one yesterday. I got it on a Friday so I could have I didn't have a lot going on. So got it around 12 noon. Felt okay till later on in the day. Just kind of feeling a little lethargic and came home, slept. This morning I woke up with a little bit of chills. Nothing like the first time though. I took some ibuprofen and that was really it. I feel much better now. But it's done. So hopefully we will not have to get a booster like they say, but we'll do what we need to do. So this morning or this afternoon, we are having a really important conversation that we really need to have. We don't like to have. So we're talking about what happens when life happens. And I think it's a conversation. You don't go to a 30 to 50-year-old woman and say, what happens when you die? But it's a conversation we need to have. What happens if you die? Do you have plans for your children? What's going on with your estate? Most of the women that are on my tribe are typically 30 to 50-year-old. They're high achieving women. And we're out there just doing it. And we cannot be ignorant that life happens. I've lost quite a few friends. Hey, Dr. Mila. Hey, Renee. I've lost quite a few friends over the last year because of COVID. And for some people, there's just been that, all of a sudden now we're trying to figure out what to do, what's going on with their children. So I decided to volunteer for us to have that conversation. And I have a good friend of mine, I keep saying Dr. Janelle Williams. She is an amazing attorney. She's based right here in Atlanta. And this woman is just a firebrand. If you want to hear the truth, she's also very funny. So I think I saw her. So can you go ahead and request to come on? Or I'll request unable to join. Oh boy. So I'm sure she'll come back on. And we're going to talk about estate planning. And she's got such amazing insight. She also used to be a criminal law attorney, and she's gone into estate planning. So last night when I was talking to her about coming on here, we talked about her why. Like, why do you go? From what she explained to me, criminal law is definitely more lucrative. So this is a purpose and a passion for her. So I can't wait for her to tell us the story that caused her to switch, right? And she's gonna come on here and kind of just share. Let's see, yeah, come in here and share with us, what estate planning is. She's not gonna give us a whole lecture, but she's gonna let us know what estate planning is. I have some questions for her. I really want to know why she shifted from criminal law to estate planning. We're gonna talk about trusts. What is a trust? What's the difference between a trust and a will? Because I think that's very important. What do you do if you don't have that much money? Who should be thinking of estate planning? How often should you update it? That's another thing. And then, advice to the women or my tribe. What should you do now? You're between 30 and 50. You've probably really built a successful business. And now we're having this conversation that, again, nobody really wants to have. I'm waiting for her. I know she was on here a minute ago. There she is. And I'm going to, so she can dive into it. I think she's coming on. You just need to accept, lady. I kind of invited you already. There you go.
Yay, I'm so sorry. I could not get it to pull up on my computer, so I'm on my phone because I didn't want to miss out with talking to you this afternoon.
Absolutely. Hey, girl, how are you? Look at you.
I feel so good. I'm so happy that you're feeling good. I certainly was praying for you with your COVID vaccine. You look amazing.
Thank you. This morning when I woke up around 6, I felt like just lethargic and
Mm.
chilled like that. But I'm much better now.
Yay.
Yay. So I've been talking about you
Okay.
and, I was telling them that you were a criminal law attorney and then you
Hmm.
shifted over to this.
Yes.
So first of all, I met Janelle at a retreat. Was it a retreat that we met?
It was. We met at the Mandarin Oriental years ago with the retreat with Akene Onu, our iconic womanhood coach. Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. And she just, she has this light that comes into the room. She's so funny too, without
Oh,
wanting to be funny, which is
thank
so
you,
amazing.
girl.
Like she makes you feel so good.
Thank
And
you.
so I reached back out to her because at that point, tell us the journey. Like you were criminal law attorney. What
Yes.
made you make that shift?
Yeah, so I went to law school to be a public defender. That's what I've always wanted to do. And I was doing that since 2004. And in 2009, my grandmother suffered a brain aneurysm. And I had never really heard about estate planning. But when she had the brain aneurysm, I heard the doctors asking me things about a medical health care directive. Never heard that term. And did we know what decision she would want to make? So, of course, I'm the second level of the conversation because I'm the grandchild. She has 9 children, so they're the main participants in the conversation. And there were people who recalled her saying one choice that she would prefer, and there were other children who recalled her making a different choice. And it caused a great amount of tension, a great amount of stress. And when she was finally removed from life support, a lot of us had very strong emotions about the decisions that were made and how they were made. And so it was one of the neurosurgeons who first said to me, she could have had this document that could have explained what she wanted. At the time, my grandfather was suffering from dementia. And so she knew these things could happen as time went along, and no one did it. And so I remember asking around who did them, how does this work? And there weren't a lot of attorneys, certainly not that looked like me, who were engaged in that practice. But I was really loving helping people in the criminal defense field. I really felt like that was where my journey was going to remain. And as this time went along, I did that for 13 years. I kept interacting with people who were looking for estate planning attorneys, and I was really struggling with finding people who were culturally competent, right? And so, not to say that we always have to have a lawyer that looks like us, but this is a very personal discussion. We're talking about very unique issues that can be very sensitive to discuss, and you want people to have a basic understanding of the things that are important to different cultures. And it's a struggle when you're talking about life decisions, burial decisions, how you want your money to be given after you're not here, or what happens if you're sick and you're having some issues communicating. It's hard to have those conversations. So it's just an extra blessing to have someone who looks like you, who sounds like you, who has a better understanding of some cultural issues, right? And so I decided when I left the public defender's office about 4 years ago to start moving towards this practice. And you're right, it's not a huge moneymaker, but it is such a blessing when you turn over the documents to your client and there's a peace that comes over them. Even if the process caused them to think about things they're not accustomed to, what I know is that their family will never face the trauma that my family faced in trying to figure out what do we do for grandma, what would she want us to have happen? Because since it's now written down, they've given their family the choice of the fact that they made that decision themselves. And so even if I disagree with it, it would have been my grandmother said this is what she wanted to have happen, and we're going to honor her wishes. And so that has really given me a new passion to make sure that I'm helping as many people as I can. This is my first Instagram Live. I'm a bit of an old fogey with the social media, and one of the things Akene has been saying to me a lot is that this is not about me. This is not about my business. It's really about educating the community to make sure that I'm serving in the way that God has called me to serve, right? And so it's really become a passion point for me to get it out as much as I can, to empower people as much as I can, because once you have the information, it's not about the fact that you didn't know. Now I know that you know, and so you can make the decision to move forward or not, but it's not going to be based on the fact that you didn't have the information.
Whoa, there you go. I knew you were going to do great. So here's the question though. So estate planning,
Mhm.
this is something that other people have been doing. I have to own in on our community. It's something which I think culturally we don't want to talk about death. So I'm going to talk about two communities. My church community.
Mm.
We don't want to talk about that. They're like, I find that. And I know, but we still have to plan, right? We still have to plan. So that's one community. And then, of course, the Black community, there's just this almost like this wall. It's a conversation we don't have.
Right.
Why do you think, like, how does that make your job harder?
I think it does make it tough, particularly in the church community. I have been raised in the Christian faith my whole life. I've certainly talked to a lot of church members, and we can spew off all the Bible scriptures about you will leave a good inheritance to your children, about how we honor our mother and father with respect and we raise our children. And there is this kind of confusion about the scriptures about money that makes people feel very uncomfortable about it. And there are scriptures about obedience of children that makes them think, well, if I give them these funds, what if they are like the prodigal son, go off and live in squalor and waste all of my resources? That's why estate planning is so crucial, right? You can put things in place that prevents them from doing that. There are trusts, there's certain documents that you can create legally that puts parameters around what they can do with the money. You can say they can't sell this house, but they can get the rents from the people that they're having in the unit. You can put something that says they can only use the funds to have educational resources for them or their family, for medical resources for them or their family. There are all sorts of wonderful things you can do to protect your children or grandchildren from making the financial mistakes that you're concerned about. And then on top of that, would you rather the funds go to your family or just be divvied out to the first creditors that show up? And that is something that other communities have known that we have not, right? So people will think, well, Janelle, I only have 10,000. I mean, what's the point of me meeting with you and paying you $1,500 to do this plan? Because that 10,000 will go to American Express. It'll go to Chase. It'll go to Citi. It'll go to whichever creditor presents themselves and says he owes me money. There are mechanisms you can put in place to ensure that that 10,000 goes to who you want, when you want, how you want. There are all sorts of unique things in Georgia law, like years support, more specific things that I would speak to individual clients about that can protect whatever assets you have from creditors. This is how we leave generational wealth. This is how the Trumps of the world are able to squander $100 million and still come back because their parents left a foundation. That foundation can be $10 high or it could be $10 million high, but it's allowing your loved ones not to start at the bottom. So the goal is to talk about these fears, talk about the concerns with a established professional who can say, okay, I know it's not pleasant to talk about death, but you're going to die. That's one of those, there's no question about it. So
Yeah.
would you prefer to give the gift to your family of making plans for when they pass what happens? Or would you prefer to pass and know that there's a possibility your family will go down in turmoil? Arguments about who gets grandma's ring, arguments about what uncle would have wanted to have happen with the property. You can write that down so that all they have to do is grieve you and celebrate your memory. Not to mention, there's also the issue of if you get sick. So estate planning is not just about for when you pass away. In this pandemic season, in this season of people being on ventilators, being in hospitals for lengths of time where they can't talk because they're struggling to breathe, what do? Does your spouse know the accounts to every utility bill that's in your household? Do they know the passwords to get into your bank account? You'd be amazed how many clients reach out. The money is there, they can't access it. And it's not because you don't trust your spouse. Usually one of us is the one that's kind of in charge of handling those things. So if for a period of time you can't be there, is your life going to fall apart because Georgia Power doesn't get paid for 3 months? Or have you made allowances for if I'm not feeling well, if I'm unable to talk for myself? These are the things that will allow my loved one to step in my place until I'm better. We can do that. It's all possible. So I try to allay their fears by saying, I know this is uncomfortable, but let me tell you about how you can make your life easier and your loved ones' lives easier. And usually that makes them feel better about the process.
Wow. So I had a lot of things written down, but you're speaking and I'm just watching your mouth. And I realized that this conversation that we're having is probably not the most popular, but it's probably the most necessary information that we need to have. Even as I was saying, most of my follower, when I look at my just my insight, it's younger women, not younger women, 30 to 50-year-old is the typical
We're
follower.
young. That's young.
Yeah, they're self-achieving, high-achieving, like go-getters.
Mhm.
So these are people that are making things happen in their lives. And we assume that we're going to be here all this while. We all have goals and aspirations, but we also all have family. And like you said, you could have $10,000 like that. Okay, so I didn't know that. Like I thought credit cards, if a person died, they just wrote it off. I know it's very ignorant of me, but like that was like, whoa. Um,
Right.
you know,
Anyone can make a claim to your estate. So when someone passes away, they have to publish that information and then the creditors come. So if there's not a will that goes, it's called intestate, it goes to the court system and the court system says, okay, everyone who could potentially have a claim to this estate, make your claim, right? And that claim doesn't only include creditors, it can include random family members who found out that you passed away and said, I know I'm her third cousin 18 times removed, but she told me I was supposed to have that car, right? So anyone gets to pop up and make some kind of claim to what's in the estate and try to provide some kind of proof of why they believe they're entitled to something. And so what a will does is it caps that ability, right? We still have to publish, but you've gone through the process of saying, this is exactly what I want to have happen. So it protects those assets.
so I know when my mom passed away years ago, she was sick, so we got a will done here in the US, but she did not have a will in Nigeria.
Oh.
So we ended up going to probate court and we were there for years. I
Mhm.
mean, that's still a very sore topic for me. You know, as you see the court system just not protect you. You think you're a citizen and they're supposed to protect you, but they're not. I mean, they weren't. I mean, I know now that's what happens, but it
Right.
just hurt my heart every time we had to go. And the money we were spending to try to do that. And by the time you're done, like there's not, you're in debt for trying to get the money out of the estate, you know, which
And
is
I
really,
get it. I know one of the big conversations we have about how expensive lawyers are, right? The saying is you don't love lawyers until you need one, right? But I think what is important to understand is that if you don't make the investment, which is a much smaller investment on the front end, you leave your family to make a much larger investment after you're no longer here to assist them, right? And I think you have to look at that comparison, right? So I've been practicing almost 17 years. There's going to be a level of experience.
routine.
Thank you, girl. Thank you, girl. So I think it's important that you understand that with that comes expertise, with that comes a level of professionalism, and that is a skill that I charge for, right? And so beginning estate plans are $1,500, and trusts are more expensive, and we talk more about that when we have our consultations. The probate process, you're talking about $10,000 retainers. You're talking
Yeah.
about potentially years of litigation that can get exceptionally expensive. There are so many probate cases that I'll read about in the legal jargon where by the time the case is over, the asset has been spent. There's literally nothing left to give the family because they have spent so much in legal fees trying to decide what you could have written down on a piece of paper and ensured was taken care of. If we start to look at it that way, we will see it's a necessary investment. So it's not about a sales pitch. It really is about thinking of how many professionals you know who will take a vacation with their family to Jamaica pre-COVID, will, spend a good amount of money on a nice dinner for their family for a special occasion. But when it comes to legal fees, they're like, oh, no, 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 right? And don't understand that if you're willing to make those investments in these wonderful experiences, this is a blessed experience. When you get your package, you know that it's done. You've told your couple of family members where it is and the general gist of what it says. There is a piece. I experience it with clients often at the end. When they sign, they're like, whew, it's done. There are all sorts of things we talk about, even in terms of protecting your assets, because you're a doctor, because you're a lawyer, businesses where people tend to sue. There are things you can do to ensure that those funds can't be touched. So you have to talk to a lawyer because people will say, well, I saw on LegalZoom or all of those various companies where they're like, pay $99 and get something done. Read the fine print on the bottom. It invariably says, we are not lawyers. Talk to lawyers before you do this because they understand that those documents can be completed and they don't stand up in court, which is what you want. You want a document that's going to stand up in court and get accomplished what you want to get accomplished. So I always tell people, in certain respects, you get what you pay for. You need to get with an expert. If I'm trying to get some fabulous dental implants, it may not be the best decision to go to an orthodontist who just decided to start this yesterday. I want to go to someone who has studied to show themselves approved, someone who has spoken at some conferences, someone who I can see on TV. See, we have to be intentional about this. It's one of the reasons why, as much as I've been opposed to Instagram and Facebook, I'm like, Lord help me. I've decided to start thinking about this more because I want more people to know. I want them to know there are options. I practice only in Georgia, so I can only do Georgia wills. But I know lawyers all across the United States. Reach out to me. I can tell you of someone that I have met or I've interacted with, or maybe even someone I've referred a case to before that you can talk to about your estate plan in that particular state. I don't know any in Nigeria yet, but I know enough Nigerians. I should find one. Somebody
I'm
in
sure.
Lagos, yes, that can help you, because we have to help each other. We're not taking this seriously in our family, and really our communities are paying the price.
Absolutely. So let's answer some questions.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor says, my mother died 10 days, 11 days ago.
Oh,
Dr. Taylor, I'm so sorry for your loss.
so
I know
sorry.
you're really close to your mom. And even though she proclaimed years before that, that she intended to give out stuff to whoever she intended it to go to, she didn't do it. Thankfully, we're only two siblings,
Okay.
right? That's one of the reasons, because then you don't, like, it's her word against the word of somebody else who is here now saying, but she promised it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I am Ember Smith says, I spent over $60,000 in 3 years. So I'm assuming she spent that in probate court.
Probate. Mm-hmm. Very expensive. Very
That's
expensive.
easy.
It
Like,
is really crazy. And I think even with two siblings, right, the thought process would be we get along. And a lot of adults will tell me that. My kids get along. They've been best buds since they were born. There is statistical evidence, and a lot of articles and therapists will talk about it. Grief is such a powerful emotion that typically, in an attempt to escape it, you go to the next available powerful emotion, which is typically anger. You will find that funeral homes deal with a lot of foolishness because you will get angry over the smallest things. The roses are not quite the right shade of white. I don't care for the way you position that coffin. It's all an attempt to get away from the grief. Part of that conversation is mama didn't like you. She didn't want you to have her dresser. She always says she didn't want you to have the dresser. Now we're arguing over things that really don't even matter. And so the fact that you only have two siblings really is irrelevant in terms of trying to figure out what is the potential for conflict. Not to mention, like I said, it's not just the two siblings that can make a claim. Any creditors to her estate can come up and make a claim to whatever they believe that they're entitled to. Other family members may present and say, she said she wanted to give her second cousin this particular item. So even if you have one child, it's important that you have these items together. And even for my younger clients, my 18 to 25-year-old clients who don't have much, I still encourage them to get a power of attorney and an advanced medical health directive. So what that does is it allows them to tell whichever loved one they choose what they want to have happen if they were to become sick, under what circumstances they want to be kept alive, how they want to be kept alive, and then the power of attorney allows them to make certain legal decisions, sign certain documents for them.
so you're saying that even as early as like 18 years, we should be thinking
Absolutely.
about that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
At 14, you really get to have a bunch more rights than normal. So you can do it for as young as a 14-year-old. But I certainly think once you're out of high school, there's some individual power you're taking in yourself, right? Mommy and daddy are no longer making all of your decisions. I think it's important. There are tons of young people who get into accidents, have overdoses, bad car injuries, and when they come out of it, will say, I would have made a different decision, right? And so this is an opportunity for them to put that in writing. Again, a blessing to the parent, where the parent or the loved one says, you know, I didn't agree with it, but he wrote it down and I abided by his wishes. And so now that he's recovering or what have you, I can say, well, babe, this is what you wanted me to do, right? So it's important. They may not have assets for a will. I think you do need to have something to have a will, something that you're saying, I want to give to someone. But if you don't have that, I think you still need a document that gives someone the authority to look at your medical records so they can help make a decision with the doctors, and that can instruct them about what you want to have happen if you fall very ill, right? So we're talking about you can't talk for yourself. You're not able to understand what's happening, maybe due to a traumatic brain injury, that is written down.
Absolutely. So we've got a question here. Shasha Bayak says, I have a very personal question. Now, full disclosure, she's only given like broad, she's giving broad comments and advices. Like your personal one should be like, you can reach out to her so she can really talk to you one-on-one about your case. She said, my husband has just done a will. He told me this, but he hasn't told me where it is. Should I have to get it if anything happened to him? Should I be concerned?
I certainly advise my clients that someone needs to know where it is, right? So you don't need to tell anyone what it says. If you feel comfortable, I think it's great to give someone a copy, even though the courts will ask for the actual original that was notarized. I think it's great for someone to have it. But I understand that in general, people are wary. They're like, I don't want nobody in my business. So somebody needs to know exactly where it is, even if it's under lock and key in a safe. Somebody needs to know how to get into that safe, because the document is not helpful if you can't find it. Right? So if you were to present yourself to court and say, well, I know my spouse has a will, but I can't find it, it's as though there is no will, right? So they'll give you some time to try to find it, but it becomes a real problem. And even if I save a copy, which I generally do, it could have changed. So really my copy is not the best document. What they want is that original that has not been torn up or destroyed, that they can say this must have been their last wishes, right? So I do think it warrants a conversation. I think it becomes an issue. I was on IG Live. I was listening to this doctor on Dr. Jamoke's page, and she said it's crucial that someone knows where it is. So if you don't want me to know where it is, I need to know who you're going to tell, right? So if there's a best friend you're going to tell, so that if something happens, that best friend's going to call me, or I can call the best friend. But it's useless if we don't know where it is.
Okay. Wow. So another question for you said, my dad just died interstate. Should we go through a probate process or not do it at all and let the state have everything? I am in dental school and I want very little stress.
Okay. So I certainly feel like just not doing anything is not wisdom, right? Because you may not know exactly what he has. I think it's definitely worth talking to an attorney. So the probate process is done where the person passed away or their last known legal address. So, in instances where a client has moved on to a nursing home, you can either do it in the county where the nursing home was or the address they had before they went to the nursing home. And in that case, we're talking about, let's just identify what the assets are. Let's identify who should get them, and work that process out before you just kind of say, I don't want to have stress. You can hire a competent attorney who can take a lot of that stress away from you, right? Our job is to do that investigation for you. And if it's a pretty straightforward process, it won't be that expensive, right? But if it's not straightforward, that attorney can advise you as to how complicated it's going to be, how expensive it's going to be, and you can say, I don't want to do this, right? The other thing about probate is that you can recover legal fees from whatever asset your loved one has. So let's say it's two siblings. One sibling decides to take the authority and says, you know what, I'm going to step up. I'm going to go to court. I'm going to get someone to help me with this. And they spend $8,000 through the process of probating. They can get that $8,000 back from the estate once it closes out. And that's not part of their inheritance, right? So let's say the estate is worth $50,000. That $8,000 comes off the top to reimburse the person who did that. And then the remaining $42,000 will be split between the two siblings. So I think it's always worth an investigation. I know that when you're already dealing with the grief of losing a parent or a loved one, it's hard to think about taking on another thing, another struggle that again makes you face to face with the grief that you're facing. You're talking about your dad's stuff. Hire an attorney in that state, in that area, and talk to them. Pay for a consultation. Tell them specifically what the issues are, what you believe that they own, what you believe that they have, and let them tell you what they can do to help. And you can just decide whether you want them to step in and take that from you or not. But I wouldn't ever advise anyone to kind of stick their head in the sand. We're trying to prevent that. Whatever your dad worked hard for, if you believe it's something he would have wanted you or your siblings to have, you honor him by looking into that and making sure it's transferred where it should be transferred.
That's amazing. You have so many questions, but I also have my questions I want to get through. So I'm going to talk about something that's really dear to me. And a lot of people know, I have a son who's special needs. What do you do when and we've had this conversation, So for people who have atypical family members or special needs, like what do you do?
Right. So our differently abled clients, right? Our clients who are coming to us and they're like, my child is differently abled. I am differently abled, right? I have some issues or things that are presenting themselves. I have MS, things that are going into more challenging stages. We can create different legal documents and legal instruments to keep your family from having to exhaust all of your money to take care of you, right? There are things called special needs trusts. These become exceptionally important when you have a child who you know is going to need extra assistance. If you just outright say, if something happens to me, my child gets $200,000, what you have to understand is that you may be preventing them from getting some of the government-based services that they're entitled to. The government will say, well, they have $200,000 now, so we're going to cut that off. You go ahead and figure out what you're going to pay for. Any parent of a developmentally different child knows that those services are very expensive. Not only will that money go way faster than you had hoped, but now the inheritance is gone, right? There's nothing left. We can put that in a trust in such a way that it's not considered by the government because it's not their money. It's something that's being held for their care. This is not illegal. People will hear like, well, that doesn't sound right. They've been doing it for eons, right? And
Yes,
I
they
think
have. And you said this at one, I think it was at a Kenneth thing you said it, and we immediately did that.
it is amazing how many people that look like me will hear about these things we can do to protect ourselves. And you're like, that doesn't sound right. I don't think I like that. How about you get with the professional and let them show you how to do it? I have colleagues who this is all they do. Literally, all they do is special needs trust. And they will have trust for clients in the millions, and they're receiving the government-based services that we pay taxes for. This is not something that you're just getting off, for free. We have put into this system our whole lives, right? We're both in our 40s. We've been paying into this thing, right? It's to benefit the people in our communities that have other struggles, right? And so we need to have these conversations to ensure that as our children grow, not only do they get the care they need, but they still have access to the money we worked hard to put aside for them, right? So we have these conversations about what kind of care do they need, how long will they need that care, how much will you need to put aside to take care of the extra expenses, and how do we protect that money? So not only can they get the government-based services that they need, but that the person who's taking care of them when you're not able to doesn't squander their money. We can specifically say, this is for their housing services, this is for their educational services. You can't just take them to Hawaii along with 18 of your friends and call it an expense that was for the child. We have to be very clear about the parameters we're placing around the money for our family members.
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah, that's really amazing there. So will that be considered? So you talked about the special need trust, but I do know also there's just other trusts. Like,
oh, there's
would
a
you
bunch of trusts.
Like between, a lot of times people just write a will, but is a trust better,
So there are lots of benefits to a trust. The biggest benefit a lot of my clients are seeking is the confidentiality, right? So when you pass away, your will is published. That's just law, right? If you have a will, it has to be filed with the probate court where they passed away, and it is published. Now, most people aren't looking that up, right? But if they did look it up, they're going to see whatever you put in your will. That's not the case with a trust. It stays completely confidential. So there's a lot of people who that's enough. They just want it to be where no one knows what they have and who they gave it to. The second thing is a trust moves along immediately. So a will still has to go through the probate process. It's just much faster, right, than if there is no will. So we're talking about a 6 to 12 month process versus 3 to 5 years, right? It's not as lengthy of a process. It's not as expensive. A trust immediately goes into play once we have a death certificate, right? Once we can say the original trustee, which is typically the person who helped write the trust, so my client, they are no longer here, the next trustee steps in, right? So let's say your husband has the trust, he's passed away, you are the next person who's in charge of the trust, right? You're now the new trustor. You take over the funds immediately. You don't have to go to court to ask for permission. You just immediately get authority over everything in the trust. So if the trust is to benefit your 3 boys, you now step in and you're taking control to make sure that they're provided for. So that's another huge thing besides the confidentiality. It's seamless. You don't have to involve the court. You don't even have to hire an attorney. You can just go into the administration of the trust based on what is in the paperwork. The last thing that's huge about the trust is it's very specific with the detailed instructions, right? So a will is very basic. It's, I have these things, I want them to go in its entirety to these places. The will says, and you can only spend the money on A, B, and C, right? Now you can put some things like that in a will, but the trust is very, very detailed with how you want it spent, under what circumstances. You can say this property is never to be sold. You can say this property can't be sold for 100 years. You can be very specific with how you want to direct your loved ones to spend the funds that you put in the trust. So there's a lots of benefit to it. People who hire me for a trust plan, they also get a will, but the will has like no information in it, right? It's very basic about basically follow the terms of a trust, but we still keep the will in there because that the will is talking about burial arrangements. There's some other technical issues that we don't put in a trust. So it's just part of the plan. So with the will plan, you're just getting the will, the advanced medical health directive about your medical care, the HIPAA release, because people forget you can say this is the decision they would want, but we as physicians, dentists, somebody has to sign a HIPAA, right? I'm not, as a doctor, I'm not going to risk my license because you showed up with an advanced medical directive. Where is the document that says you have permission to see what I see? What is the diagnosis? What's the history? So we do the HIPAA release for whomever it is you want to be in charge. And then we have the financial power of attorney that lets you make those legal decisions, go to the bank, be able to pull funds out. Potentially, if let's say a home is in the process of being sold, you can step in and be that power of attorney that signs on that person's behalf. These are documents that come into play if you're alive, right? We're not talking about you being gone. We're talking about incapacity issues. So I think when we talk about those documents, they're important, but they can be pretty basic, right? The trust is an elevation of that. It comes with all those documents, but we add to that very detailed instructions about what it is you want to have happen to your family. And then there's more asset protection. There's more of a covering for your funds than what we can do in a will.
Wow. All right. So we talked about, so again, you know, we're most of the people on are younger, middle-aged women who are out there just doing it. And this is probably a wake-up call. I'm sure, like this morning is like, come on, Jim McKay. Like, it's a great morning. We're going to have this conversation. Like, come on. But it's a conversation that needs to be had. Like, and someone might say, you know, I don't have a lot. You know, what from now, that was a question I had, but you answered it. Like, it doesn't matter what you have. The whole point is that if something tragic happens, then we don't want, our family's already dealing with a loss. Right. We don't want to add more to their plate. And now they're dealing with the infighting and all of that. And Dr. Taylor actually said, I hadn't even thought that MS as a condition that qualifies me for special need trust or arrangement.
Certainly anything that's going to require additional care is something that we want to think about a trust for, because we don't know what the cost of that is going to be as we're going down the line. So these are things obviously you have to talk to the lawyer individually about your personal issues to determine if that's what's best for you. But we need to start thinking about that, right? And I think back to your other point, I have a 20-month-old son, pray for me. And his favorite word right now is mine. Everything is mine. It doesn't matter who actually bought it and brought it into the house. It's his, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a Dollar Tree toy or if it's something we spend $1,000 on, it's his and he wants to keep it. He doesn't want to share it with you. He doesn't want to play with it with you. He wants you to understand it belongs to me. It's the same concept. Whatever I've busted my butt to get, it's mine. And I would prefer to have some authority about making sure it goes where I want it to go. And so I'm not comparing my $5 to your $5 million. What God has for me is for me. What God has for you is for you. But at the end of the day, it's mine. And I get to decide where it gets to go. And this is really about generational wealth. We have seen through the eons, particularly, my family's not from this country. I'm from Trinidad, right, by way of Brooklyn, New York. So my family wasn't here during civil rights, but I certainly going to Spelman College and Howard have heard about the plight in this country. And you hear about people who can say, my grandfather owned 100 acres in Mississippi. And because of A, B, and C, it's gone, right? And now people have built on it and it's worth $1 billion with a B. And they'll talk about all of the generational wealth that's been lost because either we didn't have a right to have documents and have them filed because at the time brown people were 3/5 of a person, or they did the shake on it thing. They were like, oh, we don't need that paperwork. Mr. Wilson's going to do right by us. And then Mr. Wilson's ancestors came and stole all that man's land, right? We may be starting from the bottom for a lot of us. A lot of us are first generation Americans, first ones to go to college. I'm the only attorney in my family. I understand that for a lot of us, we're like, well, comparing ourselves to these other people, what do I have? We're trying to build a step. The height of your step is irrelevant. What's important is that you acknowledge you are building a step for the people that are coming behind you, whether they're your children or they're just people that you love and you want to inspire. And so why not be intentional about saying, whatever I have, I want to make the decision about who gets it, when, and how. That's what estate planning is about. It's about making those decisions for those people. It's about not just giving them the gift of not having to make these decisions for themselves and saving them from the grief and trauma that comes with the arguments about it, but also it's about saying, I am going to build in my community off of what I have. And I may not have a lot, but I have a whole lot more than people who were around here in 1864, right? So let me not diminish what God has blessed me with. Let me ensure that I'm putting it in a place, in a way that my babies can grow from what I've done. Make sense?
Absolutely. Makes sense. I don't even want to read anything anymore because that's been so much. That's been a wealth of information. I consider myself intelligent and I read a lot, but you've just given me so much. Like anyone on this live, or that is a sermon everyone needs to hear in our community. Absolutely. I'm hardly speechless.
Oh, Dr. Gemma. Okay. Well, you know what? You were kind of speechless in that balloon up in Arizona when we was going up and the heat was right next to our head. I remember ain't none of us was saying a word. We were like, oh no. Oh, no,
Girl,
our hair.
I was like, this, I was trying to like save the hair. I was like, man.
That was an experience. She had us going through a whole lot, right? But I think that's why I was so honored and so grateful for this opportunity, even though I've been scared of Instagram, because I know a lot of us don't know. And it's not based on intelligence. It's not based on even access to people who are brilliant. It's based on the information we're seeking at the time. And we're not talking about the news. Like, this is not fun stuff. You're not turning on CBS and they're talking about estate planning in general. We hear about it in the shocked place of what, Prince didn't have a will, Aretha Franklin didn't have a will, Chadwick Boseman. But do you, let's not talk about the celebrities. They're going to figure that out. What have you put in place? I can't tell you how many of my lawyer friends who have seen this firsthand, seen probate with their friends. I'll get around to it. I'll do it. And now their whole household has COVID. Their beloved wife has all of a sudden fallen ill and is not making sense. There's a horrible car accident. And now they're like, daggone it. And that is what Akene Onu is always pushing me to. She'll say to me, so that person who could have seen you do this video on IG Live that you chose not to do, who's going to fall ill 6 months from now, was meant to see you and get their stuff done. But because you were like, I don't want to do social media, they missed the opportunity. When she said it to me like that, and I know that I walk a path that I believe Christ has led me to walk, I'm like, okay, Janelle, cut it out. We have to get the information out. It's not about you hiring me. Hire someone, right? Clearly, I can't help you if you're not in Georgia. If you are in Georgia, please feel free to find me. But if you are not in Georgia, I am compelling you, make the investment, get a consultation with an attorney, tell them about what your specific issues are, what your desires are, what are your goals. Let them help you.
Wow. So, less than a year ago, I knew there was a calling on my life for so long. And like
we knew it too, Javoke. We knew it too. We saw it.
Oh my God, thank you. For so long, you've just got me there. For so long, I just didn't want to share my life with people I didn't know. And less than a year ago, I started this journey to create a safe place where we can talk about the issues that concern people that are like me. You don't have to look like me, but you could be a woman like me, or a dentist like me, or a medic like me. And let's start talking about these issues in a safe environment, that if it helps you to make one more right decision, that I would know that I've done what God has called me to do.
Exactly.
And you are so amazing right now. And I'm not sure I'm
Oh, I
crying.
love you because you are fully recognizing that because you decided to do what God called you to do, you have provided a platform that's going to bless so many people. I was watching Dr. Brown talk about the burnout, and I was having a pretty difficult day trying to knock out a whole bunch of things. I was like, my son is teething. I was like, oh, Lord. And her discussion, your discussion, because I had never heard of her, helped me to breathe through that day, right? And so when you really come to the full realization of the blessing that comes from walking in your purpose, it's a powerful emotional thing, right? And you have done this. Thousands of women have been able to follow you and check you out because you decided, I am not going to rest on the laurels of me being a doctor. Hello, somebody, right? Being a successful mommy, being a person who's been married 2 decades, girl, come through with all of the big numbers, right? So you're like, okay, I've hit all the things, right? People will look at me, and then you're gorgeous and you know all that. So for you to say, I'm going to step beyond that, to do something I don't need to do something that could make my life that much more challenging because I believe greatness will come of it. And then to see the greatness come, to see people say, wow, I would have never known that if you didn't put it on your page. That's huge. That's a reason to have effusive joy. And you're my inspiration. I'm going to do better about posting on Instagram and letting people know we're a resource, right? There are people here who can help you. You don't have to do it by yourself.
Your passion and your purpose is so needed, especially at such a time like this with all that is going on. It's a wake-up call for our community to say, wait, yes, you're running around and getting things done, but what happens when life happens? So Janelle, thank you so much. I'm trying to not mess up my mascara.
I love how you still cute and you crying though. Go ahead, girl. But yes, I think this is awesome. I am going to continue to check in on the stories. And obviously, like I said, if you are in Georgia, call me 404-551-5516. My website is georgiawillsandtrust.com. You can make appointments on there. We can talk about what it is that's concerning you, and I can say how I can help you. If I can't, I know a bevy of attorneys who can. So don't just think about it. Put it on your to-do list, the date you're going to get this done. Put the money aside, just like we put it aside for a vacation. Start to save. This is important. I think the numbers at this point, according to Black Enterprises, are approximately 70% of adults of color don't have an estate plan. That has to change.
Say that again. Say that again.
70% of adult African Americans do not have an estate plan. That means that any wealth that they have has to go through the court system and probably have resources drained from it because of legal fees, court expenditures, the length of time it takes to get what you've worked hard for in the hands of your family. We can stop that. We can stop it. So yes, it's boring. Yes, it's a tough conversation, but you go through the Bible and find all of those scriptures about obedience. Find the scriptures about leaving inheritance for your children. It's in there. Don't think that God doesn't want you to talk about this. These things were put in place by the God that we serve. Don't be afraid. Find a
Amen.
professional. Do what you need to do.
Thank you, girl. I love you. You know.
Yay! So good to see you. I hope you continue to be well and that the symptoms just start fading away because I'm
Yeah,
so
it
happy
will
that
fade
you are
away.
fully
You got
vaccinated.
thank you. You guys heard her. If you're in Georgia, like you need to have that consult with her. Like just have a conversation and get it started and don't put it off. Because even the Bible says we're not promised tomorrow.
That's the truth.
All right, girl.
So good to see you. Bye,
I love you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.